Welcome to Crosstalk Solutions. My name's Chris, and today we're going to be taking a look at the big daddy of all Ubiquiti cameras. That's right, this is the UniFi Protect G4 PTZ. PTZ standing for Pan Tilt Zoom. So, two things about this camera. Number one, it's the most expensive camera that Ubiquiti has come out with yet at $1,800 MSRP. The other thing about this camera is it's the first pan tilt zoom camera that Ubiquiti has released. So we're going to check out all of the pan tilt zoom controls as well as get this thing unboxed and evaluated. Just, you can tell by the box that this is going to be a beast of a camera, in addition to the fact that with the mount, this camera weighs a whopping 15 pounds, which is just crazy for a camera, and they've got some safety precautions, as you'll see during the installation, for making sure that that 15-pound camera won't fall off its mount or anything like that. All right, let's go ahead and get this thing unboxed, but first, if you guys enjoy this type of content, make sure you give me a thumbs up and subscribe to Crosstalk Solutions if you are not already subscribed, if you're interested in seeing more content just like this. Also, if you just want to buy me a beer, there's a link to do that down in the description as well. Okay, that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the G4 PTZ. Wow, all right, so I think this is the top of the mount. Once you've got it mounted in the wall, boy, that does not come out easy. Yeah, once you've got this mounted in the wall, this is the top that you are going to be putting on, because it goes on the wall and then this sits right on top, and that's like metal. That's like serious metal right there. Okay, here we have some instructions. Actually, this isn't instructions. This shows sort of what comes inside the box. Also notice that it requires PoE++ power. That's 802.3 BT power. So make sure you guys just go grab any old BT switch that you happen to have lying around. In my case, I'm going to use this 10 gig 6-port 802.3 BT switch. This is model number US6XG PoE. All right, so here we have hardware kit. So it looks like a little box with screws and whatnot. They do a really nice job on the packaging. I will give them that. Yeah, look at that. So there's basically everything that you need to get this thing up onto the wall. Again, here's sort of the part of the safety mechanisms. Again, we've got a carabiner here that's going to latch onto something. Probably latches onto the top here, right? So this probably hooks in here so that this top can't, you know, if you're up on a ladder working on this thing, you drop the top, it's not going to go anywhere if you've got it sort of latched into this carabiner. Okay, let's pull this out. All right, so this is just the mount, and the mount here is all metal. Like, there's very little plastic on this mount. There's a, it's really tough to see on the camera, but there is a sort of level in here that you can use to make sure that it's nice and level when you put it on the wall. But man, this thing is hefty. Oh, I see. There's a little sticker on the back here. I was wondering what was making all the noise. So there we go. So this is where you would feed your network cable through, this big hole in the center, and then it mounts with these four holes right here onto the wall. So you mount this onto the wall, run your cable through the back, and then into, this is a little sort of weatherproof grommet thing right here. Yeah, this is some like heavy duty hardware. Oh, and there's another carabiner down here. So this is to actually attach the camera itself. When you've got it on the wall, you attach the carabiner to the camera so that if the camera ever comes loose, it doesn't fall onto the ground and break your $1,800 camera. And then you stick the camera up in here and twist it to lock it in. Okay, now onto the camera itself. See if I can get this out of here without destroying it. Oh my gosh, it's in a nice like bag too. Holy mackerel. Wow. Let's put this down. That is hefty. All right, don't need the box. Now, I don't know exactly why they have it in this bag, but I guess it's just part of their packaging aesthetic. It doesn't really seem totally necessary, but holy mackerel. All right, so here's the lens. Ooh, look at that. Let's get it completely out of this bag. This bag, once you're done with it, also will double if you ever want to kidnap someone. You can just pop it over their head like so. Pull the string, take them where you want to go. So look at the size of the lens on this thing. I'm not big on camera lenses. I don't know all of the little specifics, but I will put that information down on the screen here if you guys want to if you are sort of a camera nerd and you know what I'm talking about. What I do know is this is a 4K camera capable of recording at 24 frames per second. And it's got an f-stop of 1.5 and 22x optical zoom. Right, so there's the zoom of the pan tilt zoom. 22x is pretty gnarly as far as zoom goes. On top, all we have is a reset hole right here, and then we have our PoE++ in, and then we have this sort of hook, which is again where the carabiner is going to hook onto when you sort of attach this up into the mount that it comes with. Wow, this thing is so beefy. There's also a little thing on the side here with 2 screws. Looks like a little compartment of some sort. I wonder what that's for. You know what, let me unscrew that. While I'm unscrewing this, I should mention that you see this shroud here. It helps keep the weather out of the camera, right? Because it's hanging upside down and it just sort of protects drops and stuff from actually hitting the camera itself. But regardless, the camera is IP66 weatherproof, which is actually pretty impressive. I would have no problem having this camera outdoors in basically any environment. So I don't know what this port is. I'm gonna hold this up, see if you guys can see that. It doesn't look like it's any sort of like SD card port or anything. I'm not sure exactly what plugs in there. I'm gonna have to do a little bit of research on that and see if I can't figure that out. And if I find out, I will put something on the bottom of the screen here. Almost looks like some sort of like diagnostics port or something. Oh shoot, I dropped the screw down in there. Oh no, I dropped the screw on the ground. I dropped the screw down again. Yep. All right, so there's the look at the camera itself. Now, getting this camera on the outside of my house is going to be a bit of a feat. I'm gonna have to kind of figure out how to do it, and I don't think I'm gonna be able to do it today because it's actually raining outside, and I don't wanna be crawling around on my second story roof while it's raining. You know, up here in Oregon, we've got moss on the roof and stuff, so it's a little bit slippery while it's raining. I'm gonna have to wait till it's dry outside. There doesn't seem to be a way to basically run the cable in except through this hole in the back, which of course is flush up against the wall. So you kind of have to have the cable coming out of the wall for this camera. And so again, it's gonna take me a little bit to figure out exactly how to do that, and I definitely don't wanna be crawling around my roof when it's raining outside. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly when that'll be, but we will pick this video back up when I have that cable in place. In order to install this G4 PTZ, originally I wanted to put an Ethernet jack right about here somewhere, and then run a cable up through the wall, and then on the exterior side, I was gonna have the camera right about here. Now, the problem with that would normally work fine, except I found that right in here, there's a 2x4 that goes across right here. So there's some sort of framing in the way, and I don't have the tools to be able to drill down into the wall and, drill a hole through there. So we're not gonna do that. So unfortunately, this is gonna have to look really ugly and not as nice as I wanted it to. So let me show you the outside. So here we go. So instead of coming straight through the wall, what I ended up doing was just putting this piece of wood on here, right? Because normally this hole where the Ethernet cord comes through is flush with the wall. You'd want that coming straight through the wall. Since I didn't have that option anymore, I basically just made this little piece of wood and I cut a notch in it down here so that I could get the Ethernet cable through the top, and then the Ethernet cable for now is just gonna run into the window, just like I've got my Starlink Ethernet cable running in through the window. So it's not pretty, but this will certainly work for testing this camera out. All right, next step, the shroud is on and secured, and we have the Cat 6 cable going down through this sort of waterproof fitting here and sticking out the bottom. All right, there we go. The camera is now secured in place, and I have removed, I still have to remove this thing. Very nice. And the front plastic. Last step is to put the top on. All right, there we go, fully installed. Let's take a closer look. You can see up top, nice and clean. Certainly if this was out in the elements, I mean, this is under the eave of a roof, but if this was out in the elements, it wouldn't be any sort of danger whatsoever. And then of course, the big old honking camera down here at the bottom. All right, let's get this thing fired up and brought into UniFi Protect. Adoption into UniFi for the G4 PTZ was very simple. You simply make sure that the camera's plugged into the same LAN subnet as UniFi Protect. UniFi Protect discovers the camera automatically. You click adopt, and then it adopts the camera, updates the firmware, and you're online. Just like that, one-click installation, very, very simple. So now let's hop over to Protect to check out this camera's picture quality as well as the pan, tilt, zoom controls. We're gonna hop right into UniFi Protect because there is so much to talk about with this PTZ camera. If we click on the PTZ camera in devices, basically we have all of the standard stuff that you're used to as far as what you can do to configure the camera. So you've got your overlay information, recording quality, motion events, smart detections, basically like any other G4 camera for UniFi Protect. This one's going to be exactly the same. Where this camera is different is if we click on the camera and then let's go ahead and put it full screen here. We're at 720p. I'm going to switch that to 4K Ultra HD. Of course, coming through YouTube, that's not going to make any sort of difference anyways, but at least on my side, it's going to be the absolute best picture quality that we can get. You have this little icon up here for the pan, tilt, zoom controls. Now, the way that the pan, tilt, zoom controls work are you can use the arrow keys to move around, and then of course you can slide the zoom from 1 to 22x down here at the bottom. Alternatively, and my preferred method of doing this is actually using the mouse. So when you're using the mouse, wherever you click, it centers on, which is nice. So look, there's my neighbors are doing some renovations. So here is their honey bucket porta potty. If I click on that, you can basically center on whatever you've clicked on, and then you can use the mouse wheel to zoom in and out. So I rolled it up about 3 times, and we can see that it's zooming in about 1/3 of the way. Zooming in even more. Then, of course, you can keep clicking. I'll click on the O in Honey Bucket here, recenter everything, and then zoom it in all the way. Now, as far as camera quality and picture quality, this is really, really good. Let me zoom it all the way out again so you can see just how far away this is. The one problem that I've been seeing with the camera is on the focus, and we'll show a little bit of that later, but if you're zoomed in all the way, sometimes the camera doesn't know exactly what to focus on, and it actually picks the wrong thing. Like, there should be a little bit of additional AI built into the autofocus so that, for instance, if there's a car or person, it's able to detect that and focus in on that subject as opposed to, you know, the ground behind the person or something, as we'll see actually in the night mode or the night footage that I took a little bit later. So let's zoom around a little bit more here and see what we can see. This fire hydrant, for instance, let's click on this and zoom it all the way in. And there we go. You can actually see like the words on the fire hydrant and stuff. Really, really good. Let's zoom it back out. I saw like a pink flower up here. We're going to try to click on that pink flower and zoom in on that instead. Now also notice that this is at the 4K streaming quality. This is sort of buffering and timing out a little bit as I'm zooming in and out. Up on the side here, which you can't see, I also have this camera up on my Protect viewport. So I have viewport running out to an HDMI television, and I will show you this a little bit later in the video. The viewport has no delay. So as I'm clicking around and doing things here on the PC, what I'm doing and where the camera is pan, tilting, and zooming is showing up on the viewport almost in real time, as opposed to this PC that's actually lagging behind a little bit. And if I shifted it into 720p instead of 4K, that would actually help. But the viewport is the best way to view this camera, but you can't control it through the viewport. The second best way to control it is with the PC, and of course at a lower resolution is better, even if you're just streaming at a lower resolution but recording at full 4K quality. it's better to use the 720p for, moving around. It's going to be a lot faster because there's a lot less data streaming over to your computer. And then finally, on the phone itself, if you are on your your smartphone device, especially if you're over a slower connection like LTE, that's sort of the worst user experience for pan tilting and zooming. It's like very far delayed, and I'm talking like 5 to 10 seconds delay from when you make a move on the pan tilt zoom on the smartphone to when it actually catches up to the stream. The camera itself zooms pretty quick, but again, it's the streaming and getting that change to register to your device that actually takes the most time. So here's a little pink flower right here. We're going to click on it to center on that pink flower. And then let's go ahead and zoom all the way in. So there we go. Now, again, the picture quality is amazing. All the way zoomed in, 22x with 4K quality. You can see individual blades of grass. You can see individual leaves on this bush. You can see the weeds in the sidewalk. I mean, the quality is definitely there. It looks really, really good. But let's zoom all the way back out, and I want to show you something different. See how it's stuttering? You get the little blue circle as you're zooming, and it's a little slow. Like on my viewport, I'm now all the way zoomed out. Right, so it zooms out first on the viewport and then ends up hitting this stream here. Let's go ahead and switch this into 720p instead of 4K, and you'll see there's a definite difference in streaming, but there's also a definite difference in picture quality. So go back to my pan tilt zoom controls. We're going to center on that flower again, and then we're going to zoom all the way in. Now, definite difference in picture quality. And the zoom actually lagged there a little bit. So let's zoom all the way in again. Hopefully it won't lag this time. There it goes. Boom. So you see all these sort of like blurry artifacts throughout the picture. Now, at 720p streaming, once you're all the way zoomed in, the picture actually looks pretty good. It's not, 4K quality, but it does look pretty good. You can still see, individual leaves on the bush and individual blades of grass. So that's not too bad. It's really just the quality that you're streaming is really about how quickly can you make that pan tilt zoom happen. All right, let's zoom in now on something that's much further away. You can see my neighbor's house down the street. This is what we are zooming in. Of course, this is back to 4K quality. And again, the 22x zoom is just absolutely amazing. So once it gets all the way in, it then focuses, and now you've got a solid shot. In most cases, though, you're not going to be leaving it like 22x zoomed in. This is basically for like a security guard or someone who happens to be watching the feed. If they're actively monitoring a parking lot or something, this is where they might want to use the 22x zoom. And you can even see the Okay. All right. Well, let's zoom all the way back out and see how far away that was. Now, what about tracking with this camera? So, how easy is it to follow subjects as they're walking around? And I would say that it could actually use a little bit of work. So, here's some footage that I took yesterday when I was playing with this camera, and I happened to spot a woman who was walking her dog. I took the opportunity to track her as she walked in front of my house here. Let's see how that went. So up here in the corner, here she is. Now, I will be putting up the actual 4K footage on this video, but this is me from my PC trying to track this lady as she's walking. So you can see the zoom is a little bit aggressive, right? So I zoomed too far in, I lost the subject, and then I have to zoom back out. Notice the focus too. The focus went to the tree and then the other tree. And now we kind of zoom back out and I can see her again. I'm going to recenter on her and the dog. Don't you dare go on my yard, dog. All right, now tracking them as they walk across the front. And I'm just using the mouse to click where I want the camera to center. This is actually a lot more difficult if you're using the arrow keys. To me, again, the mouse and wheel and clicking to center is the best way to do the pan, tilt, zoom. Now, here's where I'm talking about with the focus, right? So I'm going to zoom in again on this lady. I'm going to probably shoot up a little bit more. But notice as she's walking away here, the focus changes to this tree, which I understand that's going to be a really difficult shot to focus on. But again, if there's movement in the frame, I would think that the system would be smart enough to autofocus on the movement instead of this, static image of the tree. So the picture quality is really good, but if you're trying to track something that you really need to grasp a license plate or something like that, the pan, tilt, zoom controls are just a little bit sluggish to actually, zoom in very quickly on a particular subject. Like if there was a car driving away and you wanted to center on the car as it's moving and, zoom in so that you could catch the license plate, you're gonna have a pretty tough time doing that with the keyboard and mouse controls, and it's almost impossible to do if you're using your smartphone to do the pan, tilt, zoom. That being said, if they made some sort of accessory for the pan, tilt, zoom, like some sort of joystick or game controller almost type of thing, where you could use that and make the pan, tilt, zoom much more fluid, then that would be a really awesome accessory to have. Okay, let's look at some night mode footage, and I will give this camera huge kudos for the night vision. The night vision on this camera is spectacular, as you will see, especially when you're zooming very far in and the light has to adjust to wherever you're zooming. It works really, really well. So here is just a zoomed out shot of the street in front of my house. So here I go walking by, and you'll see, again, I'm going to put the actual 4K footage up there, so it's when zoomed all the way out at this distance, which this is probably about 40 feet or so from the camera, it's tough to recognize someone when you're not zoomed in, unless you actually know that person, right? If you knew who you were looking at, or you had an idea of who that was, you'd be able to recognize someone. But if it was a total stranger, it would be very difficult to use this footage to actually identify someone, unless, as I said, you're zoomed in, which we're going to see here in just a moment. I want to say also that all of the zooming that I'm doing in this night shot was done on my phone, and when I was close up to the camera, I was using my Wi-Fi. But if you can kind of barely see me off on the side here, fiddling with my phone. I had to disable the Wi-Fi and switch over to LTE, and then switch the stream down to 720p for it to be useful at all. So if you're going to be pan, tilt, zooming from somewhere else in the world, set your stream resolution down to 720, and then if you're using LTE or something like that, it's fine. But look at this. So you notice that I tried to pan the camera, and it was just so unresponsive on my phone that I ended up over panning and then kind of just hitting my rain gutter here. All right, coming back now. Now I overcorrected the other direction, and the camera is looking right behind itself at the wall. And so each time you see movement here, that's me on my phone sort of adjusting the camera and then waiting about 5 seconds or so for it to catch up with the adjustment, for the stream to catch up with the adjustment. So what I ended up doing is just very small adjustments and then waiting, and then there's another small adjustment and then waiting, and now you can see I'm sort of getting back to myself standing in my own driveway. But even so, just like I said, the slightest adjustment has a tendency to move it too far before the stream catches up with it. Now, even though I'm having trouble adjusting it, I mean, just look at the picture. The picture is really good, right? So obviously this is a residential street that is lit up by street lights and stuff, and as well as house lights. But the night vision quality of this camera, in my opinion, is maybe the best that Ubiquiti makes. The G4 Pro would be a very close second, but of course that is a fixed camera. There's no pan, tilt, zoom. And you'll see when I zoom in, the quality is just really, really good. Yep, so now in this case, when I'm zooming in, I ended up deciding to walk myself into the frame rather than try to adjust it while zoomed in. Because while zoomed in, it's very wild, right? If you're zoomed all the way in, it makes sense. The slightest camera movement is going to be 22x magnified, as opposed to when you're all the way zoomed out. So here's me getting into the frame of the camera. Now this is where we're going to have a little bit of problem. So when it focuses on me, it's great. But like if you look at this footage right here, it's not focused on me. It's focused on the ground behind me. So even though I'm moving around and there, now it's focusing on me a little bit. Like when I actually start to move, sometimes it'll focus on me. But by and large, it's not focused on me directly. Of course, also keep in mind that this isn't really the way that you would use the pan tilt zoom camera. You wouldn't be zoomed in on someone that's just 20 feet, 30 feet in front of the camera at 22x optical zoom. So the 22x optical zoom is meant for subjects that are much, much further away. All right, zooming all the way back out, you'll see the light adjust, and now I'm going to change positions. I believe all of this part was done with Wi-Fi on the phone. And when I get back to this further position, I'm going to switch my phone to LTE and start using LTE from across the street to control the pan tilt zoom. So here's me most of the way zoomed in. Again, I'm trying to sort of get the camera to find me again. And there I am over here in the corner. So now I'm getting a little bit closer, and I'm just doing like slight movements with the pan tilt zoom controls and then waiting for it to catch up before I do any more zooming. All right, so now I've basically got it mostly centered on me. I think I do try to zoom it in a little bit more here. And again, nighttime picture quality, this is probably, this is the other side of the street. So this is probably, 100 feet or so away from the camera itself. And you can clearly recognize that that is me. Right? And anyone that, this could be used if you had a robbery and you had someone at this distance in this clarity, you could use that as evidence against them in a court of law, which is kind of the way that I gauge the powerfulness of a camera's lens. Now, in this segment here, you see that I'm walking away down the street. I'm kind of walking away over here. I am controlling the pan tilt zoom through LTE as I walk away from the camera. So I was kind of seeing, like, as my phone is moving, am I able to sort of track myself through the darkness, while walking away? And again, it's only moderately successful, right? I was able to center it on sort of the location where I'm going to be standing, which is over here on this house on the corner at the down my street a ways. There, now you can see me starting to zoom in on myself as I walk down towards that house. But again, you have to make slight movements with the phone or with the controls on your phone and then wait for the stream to catch up to those movements that you made. So you can see here I'm trying to dial myself in. I'm over there standing on the corner in the middle of the night like a lunatic in front of someone else's house, trying to get this dialed in. And I don't like necessarily looking like a lunatic in front of my neighbors, but, that's the sacrifice that I make for YouTube. All right, car driving by, you can see that I've almost got myself centered in the picture. I'm trying to center myself so that when I zoom in, it's still zoomed in on me. And there we go. So that is all the way zoomed in, and I'm going to zoom out now, and you'll see just how far away this is. You're also going to see me sink into the darkness as this thing zooms out. So look how much light is on me. You can recognize me at this distance, but as this zooms out, watch how dark it gets. So like at this point, I'm basically gone. I'm completely faded away. I'm about, I don't even know how many feet away from the camera, but that is like really far away. You would not be able to recognize me at this zoom level from that far away, but when you zoom in, the light adjusts to that dark spot and actually illuminates it really, really well. Now here we can see me coming up the other side of the street. I did one more small little test here, and this is me trying to track myself, just like I did with the lady and her dog, from my phone via LTE as I'm walking up the street at night. And so there we go. I did a little bit of a too severe movement, and I totally lost myself. At this point, I've got to zoom back out in order to find myself again. And I think I even stopped walking at some point, even though, again, I'm in front of my neighbor's house. I don't like creeping around like a creep in the middle of the night. So again, trying to center the camera on myself, and then I think I try another zoom in here in a second. All right, once again, standing in my driveway. I'm probably about halfway zoomed in here, and just trying to do slight movements, but it seems to like overcorrect. And zooming in, well, apparently, hey, come on, eyes up here, right? Right. I don't know where I was trying to zoom in there, but you know, we're gonna get it back on the right subject in a second here. So again, here's me moving into the frame instead of trying to zoom it around. And now we can see it is actually focusing on me instead of the ground. Let me back up a little bit, hopefully. And here is my audio check of the camera. I was about 20 feet in front of it. And this is when I realized that this camera doesn't have a microphone. Okay, so this is something that I was actually surprised about. I kind of had just assumed that it had a microphone given the $1,800 price tag, but actually it does not. Let's talk about some of the pros and cons of the G4 PTZ. So in the pro category, this is a PTZ camera, right? People have been screaming about the lack of a PTZ camera in Ubiquiti's camera lineup for as long as I can remember, and it's finally here. Again, the pan tilt zoom controls are pretty good, especially if you're using a mouse and keyboard. The mouse particularly, it's nice that you can just sort of click to center. You can use the mouse wheel to zoom in and out. Tracking people, it works pretty good. Again, in my playing with the camera over the last few days, I found that it's definitely usable. Also, the picture quality on this camera is just second to none. I mean, it's probably the best quality camera that Ubiquiti makes, like hands down. You know, the G4 Pro probably comes close, but it's also a fixed mount camera, right? That's not a camera that you can adjust. I think there's like, digital zoom instead of optical zoom on that camera, but it comes nowhere near to the quality, especially when you're zooming in 22x optical zoom and you can focus in on a subject and recognize them and read text from like really, really far away. Now let's talk about the cons of this camera. So the pan tilt zoom controls on a smartphone device are not great, especially if you're on a Wi-Fi connection, they're better. If you're on the same Wi-Fi LAN subnet as the camera, they're okay. Still a little bit sluggish and probably not usable if you were like a security guard surveying a parking lot using your smartphone trying to track a subject. You're not going to have a good time doing that with the smartphone app. There's also a little bit of noise when it pans, and it's not something that if it was far away you would be able to hear. But when you're up close to the camera, and for me, the camera is right on the other side of the wall from where I'm sitting, as I'm panning the camera, not so much the tilt, but the pan, as I'm panning the camera, there's definitely some servo noise that I can hear through the wall on the inside of the house. And I tried to catch some of that on camera, which I'm going to play for you now. I don't know if you can hear that or not, but like sort of the servos inside the device definitely make some noise, and it makes higher pitched or lower pitched noise depending on how fast the camera is panning back and forth. But yeah, just another thing that I noticed about this device. To me, one of the biggest cons of this camera is the size. I mean, look at this thing. It's as big as my head. This is a big, big camera. This is not an inconspicuous camera. This is like a right out there in your face kind of camera, to the point where like my wife has already complained about this being on the front of our house. It looks like we're running a drug den here or something because of the amount of cameras that I have. And now I've got this massive pan tilt zoom camera sitting up here that's just right out there in the open. You can see it driving down the street. You can see this camera hanging off my house here. And at night, it's got these red, IR LEDs that make it look like the Eye of Sauron, hanging off the front of my house. In my case, I'm going to be taking this camera down. I'm not going to leave this up on my house just because, again, it's almost embarrassingly large to have this camera on a residential home. That being said, if you're running a business where you're using this camera to look over a parking lot or look over a big open space or something like that, maybe survey a whole warehouse, you might want it to be conspicuous, right? You might want everyone to know that there's a big, huge honking camera here that is catching you on camera if you're going to try to steal something or break into a car or something like that. It might be nice to have a big old camera right in people's faces. So I guess it really depends on the use case whether you think this is like a super large or too large of a camera. The autofocus AI could use some work. Again, I think that's just a software problem. If they could sort of fine-tune the autofocus so that it's focusing on whatever movement is in the frame, I think that would be a much better way to do it. And perhaps they can just do that with the software update. And then finally, again, no microphone on this camera, which I kind of understand that decision because it's a pan tilt zoom camera with 22x optical zoom, right? If you're zoomed in 22x on a subject that's, a quarter mile away from the camera, you're not going to be able to pick up any sound anyways. So what's the point of having a microphone on it? Well, in my case, I like having the microphone because I have it set at a certain frame, right? I have it sort of catching this street and I can see cars as they're driving by. I can see people as they're walking by. So even if I'm not catching microphone audio from really, really far away, for an $1,800 camera, I would still like to have the microphone on the camera picking up whatever audio it can hear. Again, even if it's not useful for something that's like zoomed in, way over there. Now, how could this camera be improved? I mean, it's one thing for me to say, oh, this stuff sucks and this stuff's really good, but how would I actually improve this camera and, in my opinion, make it worth the $1,800 price tag? There's a number of things that I would suggest to Ubiquiti for improvement. And lucky for Ubiquiti, a lot of these things are just software, right? I think the hardware of the camera is actually perfectly fine. A lot of the fixes and improvements are just straight software that hopefully they can implement over time or improve over time. So the number one thing I would improve with this camera is get some improved pan tilt zoom controls on the smartphone. So the way that the smartphone app works is you've got basically like a little, directional keypad type of thing, and you can sort of move it left and move it right, move it up and down. But on the smartphone, it would be great if you could have that mode, but maybe have a different mode where, much like using the mouse on a PC, you could simply tap where you want the camera to be centered. So if you could just tap to center on a smartphone, that would make this so much more usable because you don't have to guess how far you're panning or tilting and then, have to overcorrect to come back the other direction. Just tap on what you want the center of the camera's view to be, and you can move it around that way. So you just tap, and then you wait for the stream to catch up, tap again, etc., etc. I think that would be a way more usable smartphone app for the pan tilt zoom controls. I think they can also improve the zoom speed, both on the PC as well as on the smartphone. When you zoom in and out, there's quite a delay, and actually zooming out seems to be quite sluggish, especially when it first starts zooming out. And then as you're zooming out more and more, it sort of speeds up. But the initial zoom out should be a lot quicker than it actually does. It's just very, very slow on the initial zoom out. So again, software stuff that hopefully they can fix with like a firmware update. In general, I think the pan tilt zoom controls can be just more fluid. It would be great to have an accessory like a joystick type accessory so that you could use the viewport, which actually has very fluid controls. In fact, I'm going to show you that right now. Okay, so here is my PC, and this is where I'm going to be doing the pan tilt zooming. Up here on this television, this is an HDMI connected viewport device. So I'm viewing the same stuff on both screens. Now, this is at 720p streaming resolution because I wanted to give this the best chance possible of basically being the same speed. Now I'm going to click here to do the pan tilt zoom. You can see the controls popped up and those will fade away in just a second, but I'm actually going to use the mouse to do the zooming, right? So now if I start clicking around, notice that it changes on the viewport before it changes on my PC, whereas my PC is where I'm actually controlling it, but it goes to the viewport. It updates on the viewport before the PC. So let me just zoom around a little bit more. You can see what I'm talking about. So like here's this car going by. I'm going to sort of center on this car. And very clearly you can see, let me zoom in. It's zooming in here before it zooms in here, and it'll stop here before it stops here. Zoom back out. So that's what I'm talking about, where these controls can be a little bit more fluid, because they can do it. It's working on this viewport just fine. If it was the same responsiveness on the PC or on your soft phone device as it is on the viewport, it would make this thing way, way, way more usable and much easier to track subjects as they're moving around. Some other straight up software improvements that I would like to see in UniFi Protect. It would be really nice if this camera could have some sort of sentry mode. And by sentry mode, I mean if you were able to say, here's frame A, point A, and here's frame B, or point B, right? Point A, point B. And then set the camera so that basically once every 30 seconds or once every minute, it's just sort of bouncing back between two locations, you know, constantly panning this particular area that you want to catch. So for instance, if you had a big parking lot in a 180 degrees span, you could sort of catch one side of the parking lot and just constantly be scanning that parking lot back and forth with the camera. That'd be great. And again, I'm just calling it sentry mode. I don't know what you would actually call it, but that would be super, super cool. Another really cool feature that I think would be, I don't know, I'm not a software developer, but I think it would be something that's definitely possible to implement, would be some sort of AI tracking. So for instance, there's already smart detections built into Protect, meaning that there's smart detections for people and there's smart detections for cars. What if you could put some software in Protect that would basically allow the pan tilt zoom camera to be on, like, here's your main view, but if someone walks by, let's zoom in 30% and follow that person as they walk by, and then zoom back out to our standard view once that person has gone off frame, right? That would be amazing. Now, if there's a lot of people walking by, I don't know how you would be able to tell the camera to use that feature, but for like a parking lot or something where there's like relatively low traffic, if you could set it so that it captures cars that drive by or captures people, you know, selectively either or both, that would be a really great feature, and I think something that would be probably not too difficult to program in. Finally, the last way I think this camera can be improved is put on a microphone, right? Put a microphone on this camera. That's a hardware revision. Obviously, that can't be done with software, but for the $1,800 price tag, I think it should have a microphone. Now, of course, I saved the best for last. Let's deal with the elephant in the room, the price tag. Okay, this device is $1,800 MSRP. Is it worth that price, right? And I think the answer is, it depends, right? Just like anything, it depends. If you are a home user and you just want, and you have, you know, the CloudKey Gen 2 Plus running UniFi Protect, I don't think it's worth spending $1,800 on this camera for your house, especially considering that you're not going to be sitting there manning the camera all the time, you know, moving the pan tilt zoom around to catch different subjects. I mean, I would hope you're not. Maybe if you're a total creep, you might be doing that to spy on all your neighbors or something, but that's a totally different use case, right? For the normal person that just has this camera on their home, without some of those like automatic sentry or sort of AI, you know, zooming in on people type of features, there's really no need to have a pan tilt zoom camera for your home, at least not one that's $1,800. You could go for something like this instead, right? This is a Rayo Link camera. This is one that they sent me. I have not gotten around to reviewing this camera yet, but this is not nearly as conspicuous as the big old black honkin' head-sized, PTZ camera from Ubiquiti. This is something that's much more realistic for like a home environment. And the price on this is, I think, like around $400. Let me pull it up here. Yeah, I'm sorry, less than that. This is $229 for this one. Now, granted, it's only 4x optical zoom, which is not a lot. It's also not 4K, right? This is I think it's 5 megapixel, which is like, what, 2.5K? Yeah, 5 megapixel. It's like 2,500 pixel resolution, something like that. But again, for home, there's different uses. For a business, $1,800 isn't probably that bad for this camera if you're going to have like a security guard monitoring a parking lot or monitoring an open area, or if you're, if you have a security shack in a mall or something where they're actually going to be actively using the pan, tilt, zoom camera to pan, tilt, and zoom. If you're actually using it and you're already bought into the UniFi Protect infrastructure, then this camera is actually pretty reasonably priced. But let's actually check out some of these prices, right? I went through and I picked out a bunch of similar-ish, priced cameras, right? So the first one, of course, is this one here, the Rayolink 5 megapixel. It's $229, but again, this is nowhere near the picture quality or with 4x optical zoom. It's nowhere near, it's not even in the same league as the Ubiquiti camera. So we can kind of push this one aside. But what about this one? So here's a camera from Hikvision, or Hikvision. I'm not sure exactly how you say that, but a lot of people say that this is a decent alternative to Ubiquiti. This is a 30x optical zoom camera, but it does not have 4K resolution. So this is 25 frames per second, but it's a max resolution of 2592 by 1944, which actually isn't too bad, right? It's not 4K. It's like 2.5K, if you will. So it's not terrible. This camera is also a lot less conspicuous than the Ubiquiti camera, but it's $1,049. Okay, so this is about the cheapest camera that's kind of on par with the Ubiquiti camera. This one has a little bit better optical zoom, but a little bit poorer picture quality. But it's also a more compact camera. Now, one thing I will say about UniFi Protect that UniFi Protect has sort of on the plus side is that the software, UniFi Protect software, is really good. All right, it's about the best NVR software for soft phone, PC, the Viewport. It's about as good as it gets for I really like UniFi Protect as a software. So with something like Hikvision, I'm sure they have their own NVR software. I've never tried it, but you could also certainly use this with something like Blue Iris or Synology Surveillance Station, which are, both decent NVR softwares, but you're going to be paying license fees for those software, right? UniFi Protect, there's no license fees. You're buying the camera, but you're not paying any sort of annual licensing for the use of that camera on whatever NVR software. I mean, even with the Rayolink stuff, if you want to save footage to the cloud, you're paying annual license fees for that stuff. All right, so what about Dahua? So here's a Dahua camera. This is getting closer. So again, this is not 4K. This is sort of that 2.5K resolution, but it has 30x optical zoom. In a more inconspicuous form factor. This is actually a very similar form factor to this Hikvision camera. They might even be like the same camera, but yeah, they might just be like rebranded almost the same exact camera. They're very, very similar. This camera, the Dahua version, is $1,131 for this camera. So again, we're getting up there to the same price as this Ubiquiti camera anyways. And if you're already bought into the Protect software, like if you already have the NVR for Protect and stuff, there's no reason to get one of these cameras because it would be proprietary. You couldn't get this camera on Protect anyways. So it depends on how good the software is, the NVR software that comes with these cameras, or you have to buy a third-party software where you can use, where you have to pay annual license fees and stuff. All right, let's get a little bit crazy. Okay, Axis. Axis makes really good cameras. I love Axis cameras. I'm an Axis reseller, but to be honest, I don't resell Axis cameras because they're so expensive. Like, we market to the SMB, and Axis cameras, in my opinion, are for like the next higher level than that. Like medium to enterprise would want Axis cameras. But like, here's one. This is an Axis camera. It's a pan tilt zoom with 40x optical zoom, which is a crazy amount of optical zoom, but it's only a 2K camera. It's 1920 by 1080. It's $3,099 for this camera, right? But Axis software, the software that drives this camera, is really, really good. And again, I've seen it, I've played with it. The NVR for Axis stuff is also going to be crazy expensive. So if you're going to be buying into Axis, or if you already have Axis, this Ubiquiti camera is a bargain, right, compared to some of these other like enterprise level camera systems. Let's look at one more camera from Axis. This is the 8 megapixel 3840 by 2160 with 12x optical zoom, $31.99 for this camera. Right? So price-wise, I think the Ubiquiti camera at $1,800 is priced about right. I think it's priced about right for the features and the hardware of the camera. It's not priced right if you're a home user that wants a pan-tilt zoom camera, right? So if you're a home user, there's much more cost-effective options, such as this Rayo-Link, which, you know, you're going to get 4x optical zoom instead of 22x. It's not as good picture quality, but it's also only $230. And for a home user, that's probably better. If you're a home user who needs 22x optical zoom and 4K resolution, then, I mean, this Ubiquiti camera is about the cheapest that you're going to find. Again, the problem, though, comes down to the fact that it's just so freaking big. All right, so there you have it. There is my look at the G4 PTZ camera. For businesses, I think this camera is great, right? This is, if you're already bought into Protect, if you need a PTZ camera, if you have staff that is going to be regularly using the pan tilt zoom camera as a pan tilt zoom camera, like looking around a parking lot or looking around a big wide open space on a very regular basis, then I think this camera is competitively priced. I think it can be better. A lot of the improvements that can be made to this camera are software improvements that hopefully will come as UniFi Protect gets more and more mature and they come out with more versions of the software. For me personally, I'm going to take this camera off of my house because, again, I don't want it to look like I'm running some sort of smuggling ring where I need this kind of massive camera hanging off the front of my house. It's just way too conspicuous of a camera for a residential environment. And so, yeah, we're going to be pulling it down, but I'm going to try to find maybe a business that could really benefit from this camera and take good use of it, and then see if we can donate it to that business and help them get set up and use it properly. So what are your thoughts on the G4 PTZ? Do you disagree with me about anything that I've stated in this video? Keep in mind that most of this is just my opinion, right? Everyone has their own opinions. Put your opinions down in the comments below. As always, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you give me a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, please click subscribe. My name's Chris with Crosstalk Solutions, and thank you so much for watching.